understanding of the body of water as an image reveals things that take on cosmogonic proportions. When we apply an understanding of traditional Central African philosophy, Central African cosmology to Khalil Joseph's film, we know that the image of water symbolizes the barrier between the living and the dead. Kalunga is what the Bantu Congo of Central Africa called the barrier between the world of the living and the world of the ancestors. The image of Kalunga is depicted in a circular cosmogram with a cross in its middle that is found in so many Congolese sculptures and religious objects, as well as ground drawings used in ritual practice throughout the African diaspora. The horizontal line that divides the top of the circle from the bottom is the Kalunga line, and it's often characterized as a body of water. The 4 points at each end of the cross designate the cycle of a soul's existence, starting from the bottom side that represents all beginnings, next to the right side representing birth, moving into a counterclockwise motion to the top point that indicates maturity, and then, not finally, to the left side that indicates death. The bottom point below the Kalunga line is also indicates dwelling in the land of the ancestors, and so the cycle is continuous. These points on the Congo cosmogram are important to remember as we map the Afroscape narrative spaces in this film, beginning with the opening scene of an empty round swimming pool as a young boy standing in the right-hand birth side of the circle, motioning with his finger as if to fire a gun parallel to the Kalunga line and striking the left-hand death side of the pool's circumference. After repeated viewings of this film, I've noticed that the circular pool actually has line markings on its perimeter that mark cross-like points that mimic the 4 points on a compass. His action seems to instantaneously bring on his own death by being felled with his own imaginary bullet. The oblique narrative created by this film sequence underlines how closely death dwells with life and tragedy with ecstatic joy under the constant reminder of police helicopters as ubiquitous as the summer sky over LA's Nickerson Gardens projects. Boys running through a wide open field with the type of abandon that you only have when you're too young to think about the end of summer. What image could more depict the ecstatic vibrancy of life than that? At this point, we see that there's a connection between the boy shown in the beginning of the film and the man portrayed by Afroscape kinesthesia engineering genius, a guy aptly named Storyboard. These days, Storyboard, he actually goes by the name Story Basquiat these days. I think that's appropriate too, in honor of Jean-Michel Basquiat. And as paradoxically as joy resides with pain in this community of loving interaction, in this community of loving interaction resides alongside a lethal self-hatred evidenced by Storyboard's body lying dead from a gunshot. The disorienting emotional vertigo caused by the sight of the body is compounded by filmmaker Joseph playing with time and narrative by showing a scene in reverse of a man running past the dead body. Is he the shooter? Is he running before or after the gunshot? The image of water appears again with the dead body floating in it, and then again with just empty blue water. The water signifier in Congo cosmology reminds us that we are born in water, and that Kalunga, the barrier between the living and the dead, is also a body of water. So Congo cosmology also has a specific acuity for the concept of time. The Bantu Congo have 4 types of time that are categorized as cosmic, social, natural, and vital. Kalunga, the supreme force of the universe, manifests cosmic time by the creation of events ad infinitum. So I read Khalil Joseph's treatment of time in Until the Quiet Comes to be in keeping with the Bantu Congo notion of cosmic time. He confounds the paradigm of a beginning, middle, and end narrative, instead concentrating on the poetics of a moment. That central moment in Until the Quiet Comes is the instance when we see a community frozen in stasis after a murder. In that moment, not a measurable minute or second, but subjective time defined by an event, we see Storyboard lying on a concrete pathway dead. It begins to move in reverse, much like the runner in the previous scene, but no, it's not reverse. It's something different. It's the uncontrollable spasmodic movement of awakening soul. Muscle spasms make his soul body pop up like the shouters in black sanctified holiness churches when they get happy or are possessed by the Holy Spirit. His soul body jumping up. His soul body jumping up while a community of living souls look on in frozen mute silence. Normally, I would call him a dancer, But Storyboard describes what he does with his body as being very influenced by time-based mediums such as stop-motion animation and film. He exhibits a hyper-awareness about his body creating a series of pictures that he, quote, blurs together in creative ways that play with time. Storyboard is the center of gravity for this film. He enables the film narrative to freeze the moment of death and allow us to watch the wordless language of a soul as it realizes that it's leaving this world. What he does is so poignant that I hesitate to call it performance, and I'm more inclined to say that he's expressing the language of spirit possession written in his body. At each set of bodily manifested pictures that Storyboard creates in collaboration with filmmaker Joseph for this sequence illustrates the soul awakening to its condition of death. And so he leans back in an ambivalent posture as he's being uncontrollably drawn down the concrete pathway. The realization of what has happened to him sets in with the revelation of a bullet entry wound as he rends and tears at his blood-stained t-shirt in an effort to dance his way out of his constrictions. His soul body pump jumps up, finally eases down to submit to his condition, and in a moment of revelation discovers how to move down the path in this new frozen cosmic time. Storyboard's genius with using his body for making what he calls, quote, pictures to music, presents us with the image of his soul body effortlessly masterful and fluid drift towards its destiny. And along that way, we see him becoming more and more comfortable with the revelation as his swimming flight brings him closer to the transition to the other side. He rises with head to the sky, hands clasped in supplicant prayer on his way to meet the ancestors. Having done that, he saunters and spins, counterclockwise, of course, and moves in a willful manner towards his transport to the other side below the Kalunga line. These gestures seem to acknowledge that he's freed himself from something because all semblance of struggle has left him and he moves towards the lower side with where the ancestors dwell. And what better vehicle to take you to the low side than a low rider? Yeah. The sweet chariot bows and swings low to take him home. The elegance of his craft and motion makes us think of how the genius of vernacular art and urban engineering has turned the automobile into a vehicle that dances. In Oakland, the illegal streetcar party events have birthed a cultural phenomenon called the sideshow that marries hip-hop, dance, and car culture in interdisciplinary visual events where bodily dance movement is often mirrored by wave-like car motions created by a skilled driver. The car in this film seems to bow for its momentary dance partner, and in so doing becomes both signifier for transport and transcendence. The improvisational genius of Storyboard emerges again as he enters the vehicle in a reverse birth-like movement through the car window that creatively avoids the more banal entry through an open car door. In so doing, he underlines the paradox of birth and death in Congo cosmology. And I say here, ghost riding the whip indeed. People from Oakland will know what that means, because in Oakland, when they say ghost riding the whip, this is when people get out of a car, let the car drive by, and they dance next to it, and it implies that there's a ghost in the car driving the car. So, to conclude, Afroscape sensibilities entail identifying the overlaps and commonalities in African cultural expression to locate them in an African and African diasporic cultural continuum. These sensibilities provide us with the insight to answer the question, where are African ways of being made visible in contemporary expressions of African diasporic people? With Until the Quiet Comes, Khalil Joseph has presented us with images of contemporary African diasporic people in a way that explicates Congo cosmology and tacitly connects the metaphysical spaces of Kalunga to the everyday space of an urban black community. His attention to making the image of water appear in the moment of death and having the film begin its narrative in stark summer daylight, transition to the setting sun, and end with twilight is keeping with Congo cosmogonic notions. The key Congo cosmogram is oftentimes called the 4 moments of the sun, and the left-hand point on the circular ideogram represents the sun setting in the west. The moment of transition to the world of the ancestors is symbolized by the sunset, and Joseph appropriately ends his film with moments that follow the sun setting in the far west, Black Los Angeles, California community of the Nickerson Gardens housing projects. Now, whether Joseph willfully creates these images as an intentional call in response to Bantu Congo cosmology, or whether they have manifested innately from the imagination of an artist cognizant of Afro-diasporic cultural phenomenon is moot. It is in the closing section of Flash of the Spirit's second chapter on self-taught artist Henry Dorsey that Professor Thompson affirms the autonomy of the black artist to draw upon our Congo heritage freely. He says, quote, Henry Dorsey may never have heard Mbanza Congo or Luongo. He may not have had to. I suggest that he was their progeny by virtue of the culturally open and responsive spirit of his imagination. So accordingly, as a visual culture scholar, I theorize the notion of the Afroscape as congruent with Professor Thompson's notion of African cultural continuity in the diaspora. And it is here again that I acknowledge the flash of the spirit as a bright light along the path that declares the efficacy of an always already Africanity anywhere black cultures are manifested in the Americas. Thank you.